Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We're going to start off by talking about hurricanes. That graph that you see over there on the right shows the first three systems of the year, all of which were tropical storm strength, but Artha, Bertha, and Cristobal. Combined, they've got us already well ahead of average on accumulated cyclone energy, and of course, Arthur and Bertha did impact the Carolinas. But right now, Cristobal is going to do something quite unique in that it's going to make its way almost straight north and then head off into Canada, which is a very rare trajectory for a tropical cyclone. Now, yesterday on Sunday, captured this beautiful satellite animation here from our GOES 16 satellite looking at the broad circulation around Cristobal, which spread heavy rainfall from Florida all the way back to Louisiana. And as it was pushing itself to the north, we can take a look at what the weekend precipitation looked like. So our last 72 hours, you can see parts of Florida getting over to Louisiana, easily picking up between 3 and in some locations in excess of 10 inches of rainfall. In North Carolina, we do notice here that over the weekend we did have a few regions here that picked up some heavier rainfall, with a couple of swaths in there picking up an inch plus of rain from some of the showers and storms that did pass through. But meanwhile, while all that was going on, here in the high plains, we were smashing records in terms of the highest number of significant wind reports, that being over 75 miles an hour from a thunderstorm complex that went racing through parts of the high plains here. So this has been a very active pattern. It's going to continue into the near future. Now let's just get a rest of our update here on Cristobal, because normally we watch these systems get picked up in the westerly winds or swept to the east by a front, and they impact the Carolinas after coming through the Gulf. But in this case, this system is not. The main frontal boundary is stalled back here in parts of the Central Plains, North Central Plains, and it's going to take a while for it to get and push finally on the path of Cristobal, which could make it clear through Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, Lake Superior, maybe even into Ontario before it's all said and done and starts to turn itself to the right. So very rare situation there. But this is what's also quite fascinating. You're watching an animation of wind speeds from today on Monday through early Wednesday morning. And what's interesting is that the next two systems coming through are not perfectly timed. So you can see the low will be sitting here over like the Wisconsin Dells from Cristobal, and then back here on the backside, this is now the mid-latitude cyclone, the low pressure center that's coming out of the jet stream. It's going to be over parts of Kansas and Nebraska, and the two are kind of set up here, bringing in some very windy conditions and also a pretty big change in our pattern overall. Now, I want to talk bigger term before I get into some of the details about your upcoming 2 weeks, okay? And I want to first talk about the tropics, because after what we saw at the end of May, where the Mad-Julian oscillation jumped out into phase 4, went quickly into 5, 6, 7, 8, and into 1, it has since slowed down and is stuck here in phase 8 and 1. Now, where that is, that's over in parts of Eastern Africa. And we have what we call a standing wave currently sitting there. Now, that technically is a bit of a blocking feature, but if it continues, that means with the MJO stuck in phase 1 and 2, there is good upper level support over the Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico for tropical development. Now, here's another piece to our long-range forecast. We've been talking a lot about atmospheric angular momentum, and we know that when the angular momentum is high, the jet stream tends to be more zonal. It moves faster. We get more systems. Well, it's dropped off. I mean, you know I've been watching for this carefully. But that major drop-off has actually been in the southern hemisphere. And some of the big pieces we're trying to understand is, will the northern hemisphere reflect this? Because if it does, then all of a sudden we're going to be talking about the probability of having some more widespread drought issues to be concerned with. Here's the other thing I want you to see. What I'm drawing a line on right now is a graph showing you the Southern Oscillation Index. It had moved its way to be above normal, which is on the La Nina side of things. The El Nino side is on the bottom side of that zero line. But since then, it's dropped back off again, as we've seen the standing wave set up over Africa, right here where I just drew that circle. So the cooler water that's here, while there's still some stronger trade winds, which would indicate developing La Nina, the pressure patterns where we measure our Southern Oscillation Index are not right now favoring strong La Nina. While all that's going on, look at what's going on here in the North Pacific with the warm water, and we can clearly see that the main development region for hurricanes right in through here is very warm. Now let's continue building on this long-range picture by saying this. We know that one of the things that controls the eventual strength of any tropical system is wind shear. Now on this graph, what I'm tracing over here, this is normal vertical wind shear in the tropical Atlantic. And hurricane season starts in June and basically goes to November when the wind shear is lowest. The blue line is 2020. Now, if we continue to see this blue line stay down here, which there is a high chance that it could, that would be indicative of a season where La Nina was dominating the wind shear pattern and allowing for more frequent tropical systems. As it stands, this is the new forecast for July, August, and September. Now you're going, wait a minute, what about June? Well, I'll get back to June in a second. But for July, August, and September, what the current European model forecast has done is it's dried out this area a little bit. Okay, not too much, but dried it out, as it's brought the ridge and the overall jet stream position a bit farther to the north. Now with that, we still see, when you get east of the Mississippi River, more normal precipitation patterns, but I'm mostly concerned about this. These homegrown tropical systems that race along the coast potentially cause quite a bit of problems. Now, does the 7 models that are in the National Multi-Model Ensemble agree for July, August, September? They certainly do, keeping much of the heat west, but you can see now, instead of having a broad area of wetter conditions, they're kind of confining the wetter conditions here. And once again, we see the tropics showing up wet. We can expand this out and notice that the models for July, August, September are keeping this stronger La Nina event. But with the warm North Pacific, that's going to be tricky to understand how the pattern will eventually evolve across North America. But we do see that for this time period, that ocean temperatures, while they'll be slightly warmer than average here in and around the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and Western Atlantic, the main development region, right in through here, really isn't showing too much of a warm bias. So we got to watch that very, very carefully moving forward, because with the lack of wind shear, which is what's happening because of La Nina, we do see the wetter conditions showing up right now in the models. And I'm going to watch that carefully because that's the models basically advertising August, September, October, an active hurricane season. I also notice this, where they're keeping the high pressure cell in the Atlantic is pretty far to the central, maybe even eastern Atlantic. So that means systems may have more of a probability of doing something like this than really getting far over into the Caribbean. Doesn't mean we can't do some homegrown systems out of the Caribbean. But what you need to watch all season long is to see where this high pressure cell goes. Because if it stays there, that lowers our risk of drought. But if it moves east, it could shove more of these tropical systems directly into the coast. So we've got a lot of moving pieces here with this forecast. Now this morning when I was preparing this, let's get back to the near term here, the jet stream was cranked, and you can see we had temperatures in the Intermountain West below freezing and overnight lows in the central part of the United States that didn't get below 80. This is what our all hazards weather map looks like. And while right now over here in the Carolinas things look quiet, look at all of the intricate details we have west of there. Flood watch from Cristobal, high wind warnings, red flag warnings for fires, and then in the west, freeze warnings and winter weather advisories. And again, it's all this highly amplified jet stream pattern with Cristobal cutting right underneath that ridge. So where's it going? Well, over the next week, you can see the main precipitation path of Cristobal right in the middle part of the country. When we talk about what we're going to be experiencing over here in North Carolina, there's a pretty good chance that much of the state gets at least a half-inch of rainfall over the next week with some maybe locally heavier amounts. But in terms of what that would be in terms of normal, it's pretty darn close to normal for us to get about that amount of rainfall each week this time of year. Could be wetter in a corridor right in through here, though, wetter than average right into this particular area. Now I'd like to zoom in and show you what the high resolution European model is saying. And you can see again, it's calling for that corridor right in there to possibly be able to pick up 1 inch to 1.5 inches of precipitation. And the GFS is much wetter. Look at this. This is now bringing in 1.5 inches to 2.5, maybe 3 inches of rainfall with the pattern, the way the GFS is leaving it. And why? Just leaving a boundary right here stalled out. And I want to show you exactly where that's going to be in a few moments. Our severe weather threat to begin the week, so Monday upper left, Tuesday upper right, Wednesday in the bottom, isn't really that high until we finally get these systems combining and moving on off to the north and east. And as that happens, we could increase our chances for storms middle to end of this week. But until then, our thunderstorm threat is relatively low, especially on the severe side of things. So here we go. This is what we're going to be watching. What we got here is the European model, and there is Cristobal by mid-morning this morning. As we play this forward, let me just show you. Let's step it back here. We do see that much of the Carolinas throughout the day today and into early tomorrow morning, not a lot of precipitation. Our precipitation chances begin to increase Tuesday afternoon and evening, okay, as Cristobal finally moves here toward Wisconsin. And there's the main frontal boundary we're going to be watching. So getting into the overnight hours on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, you can see that front advances, increasing our chances of precipitation middle of the week. Now, as the front comes sweeping through, yes, we get a temperature change out of this, but it won't get here until finally at the end of the week. So look at this. This is Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening. And that's where we could potentially see some heavier rain on the stalled out boundary from Cristobal. Now, what's interesting is this boundary right in through here, which again is the combination of both of those systems, Cristobal and the low pressure system, in the GFS stays here. It doesn't go anywhere. But Thursday night into Friday morning, afternoon, and evening, the European wants to drag it off the coast, which would give us the lighter precipitation amounts as we work our way into Saturday now, and eventually into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Now, early next week, I'm going to be watching just off the coast for some possible low-pressure development. It's just that some of the models are kind of hinting at that right now. See it here? It's not set in stone. I'm going to have to wait to see how it all evolves, and I'll report to you again next Monday to let you know what I see. So as we look forward, some of the big questions we're asking are kind of labeled up here. Is the pattern blocked? Is the jet stream where it normally is, or is it shifted north or south? And is there anything upstream or downstream to be concerned about? And I'll give you a quick recap here on what those teleconnections are doing. So what do I notice is that by day 10, that's June 18th, I'm going to be watching for some troughing in this area. And what I think might be going on here is we could be getting some possible coastal tropical development. I got to watch it. But other than that, the main show here is that the jet stream's moved a little bit toward the north, and we're going to be watching troughs, one off the Aleutian Islands and then one off the west coast. The pattern overall is of high wave number, so lots of troughs, and moving. The biggest upstream feature to be watching is what's going on over the Aleutian Islands. That's going to be critical moving forward, for us in the Carolinas. And just remember, right now, with what El Nino La Nina is doing, and with that standing wave over Africa, that's where the MJO is going to get stuck for a while, okay? So week 2, notice that in both models, near average to potentially slightly wetter than average conditions here along the Carolinas. 1 is that stalled front. 2 is the potential development of something in this area. Remember, I showed it to you a few moments ago. If you're west of there, things are looking dry in the model. See that? And there's a lot of concern about drought development in the south central part of the United States, especially as we go all the way out to the 23rd of the month. Remember, what we're going to watch carefully is happening over the Aleutian Islands. That will eventually set up the wave pattern. That's what it looks like in the GFS, okay? And in the European, a bit deeper of a trough here. Now, we're going to see what that means in terms of temperatures in just a few moments. But before I get there, I wanted to give you this analysis, and we're going to look at this across the whole country. June 6th, calculated soil moisture. We know that across much of North and South Carolina, we are sitting above average on soil moisture. But this is how I expect things to change. As we look forward in this pattern, I'm very concerned here, so keep an eye on this part of the country for drought development and broadening and deepening of the drought. While in parts of the eastern Corn Belt and into parts of the Ohio Valley, things are looking drier, we do notice that with the rain coming this week, and then the chances of being wetter next week along the Carolinas, we could continue to keep our above average soil moisture. Now, if you just think about this area in through here, coming through the Delta, getting into the central and western Corn Belt, that's an area where Cristobal might buy us enough time that if we do go dry for a little while, it's not going to really impact corn and soybeans too much given how they are relatively far behind due to excess cloud cover in May. All right? So I'm going to watch those things. Where we're going to be having that drought development, though, is here. Definitely in this area where we're going to have high evaporation rates over the next week. Okay, let's talk temperatures. We'll give a little international flavor, and we'll wrap this one up. In the day today, across the Carolinas, seasonable weather. You can see this mid-80s. That's what we're looking at here. There's the cloud cover from Cristobal. But look, 105, 106 degree weather here, racing up the midsection of the country into the deep into the 90s there. As we play this forward, we're going to go, again, mid-80s tomorrow on Tuesday in the Carolinas. Still same thing on Wednesday. When does this cool down finally get here? Well, it's finally here by Thursday into Friday. and Saturday. We can see, now we're down into the lower 80s overall with our temperatures. The heat starts to build back up in the central part of the United States while we spend the weekend near average to slightly cooler than average here in the Carolinas. And again, it'll be that stalled out frontal boundary we're going to have to watch most carefully. What about beyond that, days 6 through 10? Well, both models say carry a slight cool bias as the jet stream pattern does something a bit more like this. And all the way out to the 11 to 15 day pattern, well, both models say go back over toward normal, bring up the heat in the midsection of the country, but this will be the return, I think, back toward average conditions for us here in the Carolinas. Okay, to give you a quick international update here, in and around the Black Sea, we can see that from the Iberian Peninsula over here to western parts of the Black Sea, so there's the Black Sea, so getting right here in western parts of the Black Sea, wet, okay, very unsettled weather pattern. But over parts of Ukraine, the Russian wheat belt, very warm in the near term, something I think might become a bit of a weather story in the markets. And finally, in South America, when we think about what's going on right here, this is normal for this time of year to be dry in this area as they're harvesting a safrinha crop, and heavy rainfall in southern Brazil is continuing to cause problems there after it was so very dry. I'm concerned a bit about a frost event in southern Argentina, but Argentinian harvest should go pretty smoothly moving forward here. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and I look forward to giving you another update next week. We'll keep an eye on that long-range forecast and the hurricane activity, okay? Have a good one. Thank you.